Pasteur was? What did he invent?
He did the vaccine.
Okay, so he did the rabies vaccine. Good. That's a very good thing. Not a lot of people know that. What else did Pasteur invent?
Well, the pasteurization was named after
Pasteurization of?
like milk. And
Everybody says milk. He invented pasteurization for beer, then milk. So microbiologists had their priorities a little differently than you would expect. But he did pasteurization, and he did the rabies vaccine. But Pasteur, remember when I said germs are bad? He was the guy that came up with that idea. He came up with germ theory. So the entire idea that bacteria and viruses and things like that make you sick, that was him. So before germ theory came out, like during the Civil War surgeons would do things like amputations. They were doing surgeries and removing bullets from people. And they were doing this without gloves. They were doing this without masks. They were doing this without soap. And they would be working on somebody, and if their hands got covered in blood and gore, and they needed to clean them off, they'd go, and they'd spit in their hands, and then get back to work on people while they were cut open. So germ theory changed all of that. Surgery was changed forever after Pasteur came up with this idea of germ theory, because we started realizing that we needed to sterilize things, we needed to use soap, we needed to be clean when we were cutting into people. Because bacteria is what was making us sick. It's really kind of gross, right? But Pasteur had this thing that he said. It's one of my favorite quotes in science. He said, "Serendipity favors the prepared mind." Anybody know what serendipity means? Serendipity means chance or luck or happenstance. It's good fortune is another way of looking at serendipity. And he says, good fortune, basically, favors the prepared mind. It favors people that are ready to ask the right questions when they see something where they go, huh, that's kind of funny. And most discoveries in science aren't like, woohoo, we did it. Most discoveries are, wow, that's weird. Like, that's what the most common thing is. And that's what happens here is some scientist looks at this dog and says, wow, that's weird. What's going on here? Now, as a biomedical researcher, I look at this and I think, man, this is a good idea. This is something that we could use. So if you have a muscle degenerative disorder or for aging, like how many of your grandparents aren't as strong as they were when they were young? Anybody? Should be almost all of them, because as you get older, your muscles atrophy. Your muscles start to break down. Again, muscle's expensive for your body. So there's a really great idea right now that we start developing inhibitors, or like a pill basically, that mimics what this myostatin mutation does. So their myostatin isn't working. If we make an inhibitor for myostatin, maybe we could get the same effects in somebody who doesn't have the mutation. But again, you always have to go back to, is it a right thing to do? Is it ethical? Because where I look at it and say muscle degenerative diseases, combat aging, maybe other uses that we haven't even thought of yet. If you're in the military, you look at this and go, I can make Captain America. It exists, right? We can make our soldiers stronger and faster and have more endurance. And so you have to always ask that question of where's my research going to be used? How's it going to be applied? So this is a really, really interesting example that I like to bring up about superpowers and mutations and where that interest. So it started off with, I'm interested in superpowers, right? And it ended with, maybe we can treat aging. Maybe we can help older people live healthier and longer. Maybe by the time you guys are 90 years old, you'll be fitter than I am right now. That would be awesome, right? Instead of getting old and decrepit and falling apart, right? You get to be old and vigorous and strong and be well prepared to handle the world, right? So this is another really good example of asking a big question or having a broad interest, something that's completely not related to science, right? Started off with comic books or comic book movies. We ended up with maybe there's an actual treatment for a disease here. Maybe there's something that we could start asking good questions about. Did you put in the, oh, you did? The mantis shrimp? Oh, that's awesome. So here's another aside for you guys, another area in science that I like to talk about a lot. It's one of my favorite critters. Do you guys know how many photoreceptors you have in your eyes for color? How many color photoreceptors do you have? 3, right? Do you know which ones they are?
red, green, blue.
Red, green, and blue. Okay, cool. So we have 3 photoreceptors, red, green, and blue. Do you guys know how many you have if you're colorblind?
0.
Not 0, because then you'd be completely blind.
Oh.
1.
Not 1, 2. Okay, So 2 photoreceptors for color is colorblind. 1 more photoreceptor means that you have color vision, okay? So this is really kind of crazy, right? Difference between black and white and color vision is 1 photoreceptor. Now, there's an interesting thing that we've been working on as genetic engineers for a while called gene therapy. Gene therapy means I'm going to take a gene from one place that works, and I'm going to put it into an organism to try and fix it. So maybe for these guys, it would be myostatin from a wild type animal, one that's got the normal gene, and I put it into one of these guys while they're growing so that they don't have all of these problems. Maybe that would be a fix. But the way that you usually do that is you pack it into a virus, and the virus will inject that DNA into your cells for you, and it starts being used. It starts being used to make proteins. It starts making things. Well, we now know that in apes, at least, we can fix color blindness. We can package up the gene for that missing photoreceptor that they've got. We can put it into a virus. We can inject it into them, and they'll start being able to see colors. So here's the cool question, though, is, we can fix color blindness now in apes. By, the next logical step, we should be able to fix it in humans. But here's a good question. Do you guys know how many photoreceptors birds have?
A lot.
Got 4. Do you know what extra one they've got?
No.
Anybody?
Purple?
Orange.
It's near ultraviolet. So it's just before ultraviolet. So they can see an entirely extra color than we can.
Do you know
Which is
what
kinda cool.
ultraviolet is?
It's it's on the electromagnetic spectrum.
Say it again.
It's on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's just above regular color.
Okay,
So
so
they
this
can-
would be an example of
So they
ultraviolet.
can see a color that we can't even imagine what it looks like.
That is exactly how I would phrase it. We can't even imagine what it looks like. Not just one color, though, because every other thing that they look at, if they can see things coming off of it in that wavelength, every color that they experience is different than what we see. That's what's really crazy about it. So the difference between us having color vision and having black and white vision is 1 photoreceptor. They've got an extra one, okay? So if we can use gene therapy to fix color vision in apes and give them a fix for color blindness, what's to stop us from giving ourselves an extra photoreceptor, right? And there's a lot of different applications for that. There's applications for it in sports, like imagine if you're playing baseball and the laces glow as they're coming towards you. Imagine if you're playing football and the laces, are super bright and you can see the spiral of the ball perfectly. If you're in the military, it's really, really tough to make camouflage that can be, can actually work against somebody that can see all of those extra colors. It's very difficult to do. So things like, the BDUs that our soldiers wear, it'd be very tough for those to actually look like the environment that they're in. So there's all sorts of applications for something like that. But here's another one that I wanted to show you guys.
Oh, I know it.
This little guy right here is what's called a mantis shrimp. It's about the size of a lobster. Real cool guy. Also has some neat superpowers. So you see how he's all rainbow colored? Like he's got super deep reds and blues and greens, and they're very vivid. Anybody have a guess how many photoreceptors this guy has?
10?
6, 30.
Okay, he's got a dozen. 12 photoreceptors. 4 times as many photoreceptors for colors as we have.
That was
So,
weird.
Again, colors that we can't even imagine, and clarity of colors that we can't even imagine. So anybody know what perfect pitch is in music? It's like being able to immediately know when a tone is played exactly what note it is. Well, this guy would never have to go look up what a hex value was for a color if he was a web designer. He'd always know, because it would look very, very different from one color shift to another. Very, very cool animal. He's also, pound for pound, the hardest boxer, or hardest hitting boxer in the animal kingdom. I don't know how well you can see it, right?
So it sees everything.
Yeah, it sees everything very well. It's also, instead of having one eye, like you see this band over that eye, that's an extra eye inside of those eyeballs. He's got 3 eyes on each side. Really cool eyes, way better evolved eyes than we have. So does the octopus, actually, as well. Lots of animals have much better eyes than we do. Were you raising?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if, because you said he was the best boxer, I heard that he could strike something so fast that the water around his paws evaporate.
Yep. Okay. So That's actually what I was about to say. So he hits so hard that if he hits a solid object, the water molecules rush away and create a bubble of vacuum. But the energy, the momentum that goes into those water is enough to push them away and make a bubble that's a vacuum before it collapses again. But when he does that, as he hits, the temperatures that are reached when those two hard surfaces meet are greater than the temperature of the surface of the sun. Super, super hard-hitting guy. Imagine if that's what happened when you were in the boxing ring with Evander Holyfield or Muhammad Ali or any great boxer in history. That's how hard this guy hits.
Could you like get the genes of that and mutate it?
I kind of want to see two.
It's a good question.
So if you could get him to...
It's a good question. What would you use them for? And start thinking and see if you can apply any of these ideas. What that he has could maybe be useful somewhere else in science. Start with that big question. Could you take these genes and put them into a human? Well, what would you use them for? Is it a good idea? Like, where could you actually fit them in someplace where it would be useful?
Has one of those ever hit a human before?
Yes. In the aquarium world, if you keep these, they're affectionately known as thumb splitters because if they hit you in the hands, it usually splits it right down to the bone. It's a pretty nasty thing to get hit by. If you keep them as a pet, you actually have to get special aquarium glass, or they'll just break through the glass. You're like, hey, who's a stupid mantis shrimp? And he's like, and breaks through the glass. Okay, so you have to have special glass to keep these guys. So, how much time do we have left?
About 7 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to take a brief second and talk about what I do right now. So I got my PhD from UT Southwestern Medical Center. It's actually down the road by Parkland Hospital in downtown Dallas.
My mom works there.
Your mom works there? Awesome. So what I do now is I'm at a place called Science Entertainment Design. It's right here on my shirt, SED. And we're here in Coppell. We're what we call a science learning laboratory. So our whole job is to get you guys the tools and the help and the mentoring that you need to do science that's interesting to you. So we run all kinds of different programs. For your age, what we're doing is what are called focus pods. Think of it like a club where people that have a similar interest as you in science can get together and work together and learn together. So one of them is robotics. I teach robotics. I really think robots are fun. And it sounds like it could be something that's really boring, right? Like, how many of you sound really excited about the idea of going to a science program in the evening, right?